Welcome, dear listener, to another journey through the corridors of time. Tonight, we invite you to settle into comfort, to let your breathing slow and deepen, as we explore one of history's most fascinating yet misunderstood orders, the Knights Templar. Close your eyes, if you haven't already, and imagine yourself stepping back nearly 1,000 years, to a world where faith and sword walked hand in hand, where the line between sacred and secular blurred like morning mist over ancient stones. The Knights Templar, those warrior monks who captured the imagination of medieval Europe and continue to fascinate us today. You need not concern yourself with conspiracy theories or modern fiction tonight. Instead, we'll walk the dusty roads of the 12th century, breathe the incense-heavy air of monastery chapels, and witness the daily rhythms of men who believe they serve both God and gold with equal devotion. We'll discover how a small band of knights protecting pilgrims grew into Europe's most powerful financial institution, how prayers and profits intertwined in ways both noble and troubling. Let the modern world fade away as we begin our gentle exploration of these warrior monks, starting with the most humble and human aspect of their story, the daily life of those who joined their ranks. Imagine yourself awakening before dawn in a Templar commandery somewhere in the countryside of 12th century France. The stone walls around you retain the night's chill, and your breath forms small clouds in the dim air. There are no windows in your simple cell, just a narrow slit that allows the faintest suggestion of approaching dawn to seep through. The straw beneath your rough woolen blanket rustles as you rise, your joints stiff from sleeping on the hard wooden bed frame. The bell has not yet rung for matins, but your body has learned the rhythm of the hours. Around you, in identical cells, your brother knights are stirring as well. Some have been members of the order for decades, their faces weathered by countless campaigns in the Holy Land. Others, like yourself perhaps, are newer to this life of dedication men who traded the promise of marriage, inheritance, and worldly comfort for something they believed far greater. You dress in the same simple garments you wear each day. First, the long linen undertunic, then the brown or black habit that marks you as a member of this religious order. The white mantle with its distinctive red cross, that symbol that strikes both fear and reverence into the hearts of Muslims and Christians alike, that comes later for ceremonies and battle. For now, in these quiet morning moments, you are simply a man preparing for prayer. The bell begins its slow, measured tolling, echoing off stone walls and earthen floors. Its bronze voice calls not just you, but every soul within these walls, knights, sergeants, chaplains, servants, and craftsmen. The sound travels through corridors that smell of old Russia's tallow candles and the lingering aroma of yesterday's simple meal of bread, vegetables, and watered wine. You make your way through passages lit by the occasional flickering torch, your soft leather shoes making almost no sound on the worn stones. The architecture around you speaks of purpose rather than beauty, thick walls, rounded arches, minimal decoration. This is a fortress as much as a monastery, a place built to withstand both earthly armies and spiritual doubt. In the chapel, you take your assigned place among the rows of knights. The air here carries the heavy sweetness of frankincense, a luxury that connects this simple French commandery to the exotic lands where your order fights. Candles throw dancing shadows on walls, decorated only with simple crosses and perhaps a painted image of the Virgin Mary. The chaplain's voice rises in the familiar cadences of Latin prayer, words that have shaped your days for months or years now. Te Deum Laudamus, the voices around you intone, and you join them. The sound is not beautiful in the way cathedral choirs are beautiful. These are warriors' voices, some rough from shouting commands, others still carrying the accents of distant regions. But there is something deeply moving about this gathering of men who have chosen to bind their lives to something larger than themselves. After matins comes the first meal of the day, though calling it a meal perhaps grants it too much dignity. In the refectory, long wooden tables hold simple wooden bowls and cups. The fare is deliberately modest bread that is often several days old, perhaps softened in weak ale or watered wine. Sometimes there is cheese, hard and sharp, made by the order's own servants. Vegetables from the commandery's garden provide what variety exists: onions, cabbage, leeks, herbs that grow easily in the northern climate. You eat in silence, as the rule demands, while one of the chaplains reads aloud from Scripture or the lives of saints. The words wash over you like a gentle stream, familiar and comforting. The silence is not oppressive. It has become a companion, a space where thoughts can turn inward toward contemplation and outward toward duty. The food itself tells a story of the order's complex relationship with wealth and poverty. Yes, the Knights Templar as an institution grow richer each year, their lands expanding, their treasuries filling with donations from nobles seeking salvation. But here, at this table, you taste only the simplest fare. The wealth flows through the order toward its great purpose, the defense of the Holy Land, rather than toward comfort for individual knights. After the morning meal comes the day's work, and this varies greatly depending on your role and the needs of the commandery. If you are a knight brother, one of the fully professed warriors of the order, your morning might be spent in the practice yard. Here, under the watchful eye of senior knights, you perfect the skills that may one day save your life and the lives of your brothers in the harsh landscape of Outrimmer. The practice is methodical, almost meditative in its repetition. Sword work against wooden pels, the blade cutting through air with a whisper that speaks of countless hours of training. The weight of the sword in your hand, perhaps 2.5 pounds of steel, becomes as familiar as your own heartbeat. Strike, recover, step, strike again. The movements flow like a deadly dance, muscle memory built through endless repetition. Then comes work with the lance, that 13-foot ash shaft topped with a leaf-shaped steel point. Mounted on your destrier, a horse worth more than most peasants see in a lifetime, you practice the charge that forms the backbone of Templar military might. The thunder of hooves on packed earth, the perfect moment when horse and rider become a single instrument of war, the satisfying thunk as your lance point finds its mark on the quinton. But perhaps today finds you engaged in more mundane duties, for even knights brother must take their turn at the work that keeps a commandery functioning. You might spend hours in the scriptorium, carefully copying documents, charters, letters, accounts. The work requires patience and precision, qualities that serve a warrior as well as they serve a scribe. The scratch of quill on parchment becomes another form of prayer, each carefully formed letter an offering of service. Or perhaps you work in the stables, tending to the horses that are the order's most precious military assets. These are not the gentle palfreys that nobles ride for pleasure, but war horses bred and trained for battle. Their care requires skill and dedication, grooming their coats until they gleam, checking their hooves for stones or signs of lameness, ensuring their feed is of the highest quality. A knight's life may depend on his mount's strength and reliability, so no detail is too small to overlook. The afternoon brings more prayer sects at the 6th hour, when the sun stands highest in the sky. Again you gather in the chapel. Again the familiar words rise from dozens of throats. The rhythm of the hours structures your day as surely as the walls structure the commandery. You live within this framework of prayer and duty, finding freedom in its very constraints. Later, there might be instruction in the rule of the order, that complex document that governs every aspect of Templar life. A senior knight reads aloud the regulations that cover everything from how to dress to how to behave in battle. The punishments for various infractions are clearly spelled out: loss of the habit for serious offenses, expulsion from the order for the most grave. But these sessions are not merely about discipline. They are reminders of the sacred nature of your commitment, the weight of the vows you have taken. As evening approaches, the pace of activity slows. The last meal of the day is often simpler than the morning's bread and vegetables, perhaps just bread and watered wine. consumed again in silence while sacred texts are read aloud. The light from the windows grows golden, then orange, then fails entirely, leaving the refectory lit only by the warm glow of tallow candles. After Compline, the final prayers of the day, you return to your cell as darkness settles over the commandery. The stone walls that felt cold in the morning now hold a trace of the day's warmth. You kneel beside your simple bed for private prayer, perhaps contemplating the letters that arrived today from the east, carrying news of your brothers fighting in the Holy Land. Some speak of victories, of Saracen armies turned back from Christian strongholds. Others carry darker tidings, the names of brothers who will not return, who have found their eternal rest beneath the harsh sun of Palestine. In these quiet moments, you might reflect on the path that brought you here. Perhaps you are a younger son of a noble family, faced with the choice between a minor inheritance and a life of true purpose. Perhaps you are a knight who saw too much blood spilled for petty causes, who sought to turn your skills toward something higher. Or perhaps you simply heard the call that echoes through Christendom, the need for dedicated men to protect the pilgrims walking in Christ's footsteps and to defend the holy places where he walked. The life you have chosen is not easy. The vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience constrain you in ways that your former companions in the world would find suffocating. Yet there is a deep satisfaction in this rhythm of prayer and duty, in knowing that your life serves a purpose greater than personal ambition or earthly pleasure. As sleep begins to claim you, lying on your simple bed beneath rough woolen covers, you can hear the night sounds of the commandery settling into rest. Somewhere, a brother suffers from old wounds taken in the service of the cross, his quiet groans a reminder of the price of their calling. In the stables, a horse snorts and stamps, perhaps dreaming of grass and sunshine. The night watch takes up his position, protecting this small community of men who have dedicated their lives to protecting others. Tomorrow will bring the same rhythm: prayer, work, study, more prayer. The days blend into one another like links in a chain, each one strengthening your connection to the order and its mission. You are part of something that stretches from this quiet commandery to the walls of Jerusalem itself, a brotherhood that spans continents and encompasses thousands of men united in purpose. In the months and years ahead, some of your brothers here will answer the call to journey east, to take their place in the ongoing struggle for the Holy Land. They will trade these stone walls for the battlements of crack-day chevaliers, these French fields for the deserts of Palestine. Some will find glory there, others will find only graves beneath foreign soil. But all will carry with them the discipline and dedication forged in places like this, in the daily rhythm of prayer and preparation that shapes a Templar night. For now, though, there is only the gentle darkness of your cell, the familiar comfort of stone walls and simple furnishings, and the deep peace that comes from knowing your place in the great design of Providence. Sleep comes easily to men who have labored well in service of their calling, and tomorrow the bells will ring again, calling you once more to rise and take up the burden and the joy of your chosen life. Let us now turn our attention from the quiet rhythms of commandery life to the grand sweep of history itself, where individual lives intersect with momentous events to shape the destiny of the Knights Templar. In this gentle exploration, we'll walk alongside the men who founded, guided, and ultimately witnessed the dissolution of this remarkable order. Picture yourself in Jerusalem in the year 1119, nearly 2 decades after the First Crusade rested, the holy city from Muslim control. The morning sun cast long shadows across streets, still bearing the scars of conquest, where Christian pilgrims now walk paths that once echoed with entirely different prayers. The air carries the mingled scents of frankincense from newly consecrated churches and exotic spices from markets that continue their ancient trade despite the change in rulers. Here, in a small chamber near the Temple Mount, 9 French knights gather in quiet conversation. Their leader is a man named Hugues de Payens, a minor noble from the Champagne region whose weathered face speaks of years spent in the harsh climate of Outremer. He moves with the careful precision of a professional soldier, yet his eyes hold something deeper, a sense of purpose that transcends mere military service. Hugues speaks softly to his companions, his voice carrying the measured tones of a man who has given long thought to his words. "Brothers," he says, "we have seen the dangers that face the pilgrims on the roads to the holy places. Bandits strike without warning, Muslims raid Christian travelers, and good people die within sight of the very sites where our Lord walked. His hands, scarred from years of sword work, rest calmly on the simple wooden table between them. These 9 men, Hugues de Payens, Godfrey de Saint-Omer, Payen de Montdidier, and their companions, represent something new in the world of their time. They are neither purely monks nor purely knights, but something that seeks to bridge the gap between prayer and warfare, between contemplation and action. In this quiet chamber, they are laying the foundation for what will become one of the most powerful organizations in medieval Europe. The idea they discuss is elegantly simple: a religious order dedicated to protecting Christian pilgrims traveling to and from the holy places. They will take the traditional monastic vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, but they will also take up the sword in service of their calling. It is a concept that challenges the established boundaries of medieval society, where those who pray and those who fight have always been separate classes. Baldwin II, the King of Jerusalem, receives these 9 knights with interest and perhaps some relief. The young Crusader kingdom faces countless challenges: a hostile Muslim population, difficult supply lines to Europe, and the constant threat of reconquest. Any group of dedicated men willing to help maintain order and protect Christian interests deserves royal attention. Baldwin grants them quarters on the Temple Mount itself, in buildings believed to stand on the site of Solomon's ancient temple. From this association comes their eventual name, the Poor Knights of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. Imagine yourself walking through these early Templar quarters, where the order's first members live in conditions that truly reflect their vow of poverty. Their chambers are spartanly furnished simple beds, wooden chests for their few possessions, a table and chairs for meals taken in silence. The walls are bare stone, decorated only with simple wooden crosses. These men own little beyond their armor, weapons, and the clothes they wear. Yet even in these humble beginnings, you can sense the seeds of something greater. Letters arrive regularly from Europe, carrying news and sometimes volunteers. Word is spreading of this new order, this unusual combination of monastery and military company. Noble families begin to take notice, and with notice come support donations of land, money, and younger sons seeking purpose in service to God. The transformation from 9 poor knights to a powerful international order does not happen overnight. For nearly a decade, the Templars remain a small, relatively obscure group. Then, in 1128, Hugues de Payens makes a decision that will change everything. He returns to Europe to seek formal recognition and support for his order. Picture the scene. At the Council of Troyes in 1129, where the future of the Templars hangs in the balance. The great hall is filled with the most influential churchmen of the age: abbots, bishops, papal legates. The air is thick with the scent of beeswax candles and the rustle of silk vestments. At the center of this assembly sits a figure whose presence lends weight to everything that follows. Bernard of Clairvaux, perhaps the most respected religious figure of his generation. Bernard is a man whose very appearance speaks of spiritual intensity. Thin from years of fasting and ascetic practice, his eyes burn with the fervor of absolute conviction. When he speaks, his voice carries the authority of one who has never doubted his own righteousness or the clarity of divine will. He has already heard Hugues de Payens speak of the Templar mission, and what he has heard appeals to his vision of Christian militancy. These knights, Bernard declares to the assembled clergy, have found the perfect balance between the active and contemplative life. They pray with the devotion of monks, yet they fight with the skill of seasoned warriors. In them, we see the fulfillment of Christ's command to his followers to be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. The formal approval that emerges from Troyes transforms the Templars from a small band of dedicated knights into an officially recognized religious order. More importantly, it provides them with a written rule that will govern their expansion and development. This rule, influenced heavily by Bernard's own Cistercian ideals, emphasizes simplicity, discipline, and absolute obedience to superiors. But it is Bernard's later work, a treatise called In Praise of the New Knighthood, that truly launches the Templars into prominence. In this eloquent piece of writing, he addresses the moral concerns that many Christians feel about religious men taking up weapons. The Knight of Christ, Bernard writes, kills with safety and dies with greater safety still. When he dies, he benefits himself. When he kills, he benefits Christ. This theological justification for religious warfare resonates powerfully across Christian Europe. Donations begin to pour in from nobles eager to support this new form of crusading zeal. Land grants, monetary gifts, and recruits arrive in steady streams. The Templars' network of commanderies spreads across France, England, Spain, and the German territories. Let us follow the career of one man who embodied the order's golden age, Gerard de Rydfort, who became Grand Master in 1185. Unlike the humble Hugues de Payens, Gerard represents the Templars at the height of their power and influence. When you imagine him, picture a man accustomed to authority, one whose white mantle with its red cross commands instant recognition and respect across the known world. Gerard's rise to leadership comes at a crucial moment in the order's history. By the 1180s, the Templars have become far more than a simple organization of warrior monks. They are international bankers, landowners on a massive scale, and military contractors whose services are sought by kings and popes. Their fleet of ships dominates Mediterranean trade routes, while their fortresses guard the frontiers of Christian territory in the east. The Templar treasury in Paris has become the de facto central bank of medieval Europe. Kings deposit there, wealth there for safekeeping, knowing that Templar integrity and Templar fortresses provide security that no royal treasury can match. The complex system of letters of credit that the Templars develop allows merchants and pilgrims to deposit money in one location and withdraw it at another, revolutionizing medieval finance. Yet this very success contains the seeds of the order's eventual destruction. Gerard de Rydfort embodies both the strengths and the fatal weaknesses of the later Templars. He is undoubtedly brave. His military record includes numerous campaigns against Muslim forces. He is also intelligent and administratively capable, skills essential for managing the order's vast holdings. But he is also proud, sometimes reckless, and perhaps too comfortable with the political power that Templar wealth has brought, a disaster that befalls. Gerard and the order comes at the Battle of Hattin in 1187. Picture that terrible day when the flower of Christian knighthood meets its doom under the desert sun. Saladin, the great Muslim leader, has assembled a massive army and carefully chosen his battlefield. The Christian forces, including the cream of the Templar and Hospitaller orders, march into what becomes a carefully orchestrated trap. The heat is merciless, the sun beating down on men encased in heavy mail and surcoats. Water becomes more precious than gold as the hours pass and Saladin's forces surround the Christian army. The Templars, following their rule's command never to retreat while their banner flies, fight with desperate courage. But courage alone cannot overcome tactical disadvantage and overwhelming numbers. When the battle ends, the field is strewn with the bodies of knights who had been the terror of Muslim armies for decades. Gerard de Rydford is among the few Templar leaders to survive. Taken prisoner along with the relic of the true cross that had been the spiritual banner of the Christian forces. The capture of this sacred object strikes Christian Europe like a thunderbolt. How could God allow such a catastrophe to befall his chosen warriors? The aftermath of Hattin reveals both the best and worst of Templar character. Saladin, following his usual practice, offers most of the captured knights their freedom in exchange for ransom. But he makes an exception for the Templars and Hospitallers, whom he sees as the most dangerous enemies of Muslim reconquest. These warrior monks, he declares, must die or convert to Islam. The scene that follows has been recorded by chroniclers on both sides. 200 Templars and Hospitallers are led out onto the field where they fought. Faced with the choice between apostasy and death, not one of them wavers. They go to their execution with the same calm discipline that characterized their lives, some praying aloud, others maintaining the silence that their rule commands in the face of death. Acute RARD, Rydford's survival of this massacre proves to be both blessing and curse for the order. Ransomed eventually, he returns to lead the remaining Templars in the East, but his reputation has been tarnished by his survival when so many others died. Questions are whispered about whether he purchased his life at too high a price, whether his leadership contributed to the disaster at Hattin. The Third Crusade that follows brings new heroes to the Templar ranks. None greater than Robert de Sable, who becomes Grand Master in 1191. Robert represents the Order's attempt to rebuild after Hattin, and his partnership with Richard the Lionheart during the Crusade restores much of the Order's military reputation. Picture him at the Siege of Acre, where Templar engineers and fighters play crucial roles in the city's eventual capture. Robert is a different type of leader than Gerard, more cautious, more diplomatic, more aware of the delicate balance required to maintain Christian presence in the East. Under his leadership, the Templars adapt to the new realities created by Saladin's victories. They rebuild their fortresses, recruit new members, and slowly restore their financial networks. But the golden age of Templar power in the East is passing, and perhaps Robert knows it. The enthusiasm for crusading that brought thousands of European knights to the Holy Land is beginning to wane. The Fourth Crusade's disastrous diversion to Constantinople has damaged the entire crusading movement, while the rise of strong monarchies in England and France creates new centers of power that view the military orders with growing suspicion. Slow decline of Templar fortunes accelerates under later Grand Masters like Guillaume de Sonnac and Thomas Berard. These men are competent administrators and brave soldiers, but they face challenges that no amount of individual virtue can overcome. The Muslim reconquest continues steadily, fortress by fortress, city by city. Each loss represents not just territory, but also revenue, recruits, and purpose. Picture the final days of Templar presence in the Holy Land, embodied in the career of the last Grand Master to die in the East, Guillaume de Beaujeu, when he takes command in 1273. The Order's holdings have shrunk to a few coastal cities and scattered fortresses. The great castles that once dominated the landscape crack des Chevaliers, Tortosa, safe to have fallen to Muslim armies or been abandoned as indefensible. Guillaume understands that he is fighting a losing battle, but his sense of duty compels him to fight it with every resource at his disposal. He strengthens the remaining fortifications, negotiates temporary truces when possible, and sends increasingly desperate appeals to Europe for aid that rarely comes. The letters he writes during these years make poignant reading, proud messages that barely conceal growing desperation. The end comes at the siege of Acre in 1291. Picture Guillaume de Beaujeu in the final assault, his white mantle stained with dust and blood, rallying his men for one last stand against overwhelming odds. The Muslim army that surrounds the city represents the culmination of 2 centuries of reconquest discipline. well equipped, and led by commanders who have learned from every previous encounter with Christian forces. When Guillaume falls, struck down by a crossbow bolt while defending the walls, he takes with him the last vestiges of Templar military glory. The evacuation that follows sees the Order's survivors loading their most precious possessions onto ships bound for Cyprus, abandoning forever the land where their Order was born and where it had achieved its greatest victories. Yet even as the Huvan Eastern adventure ends in defeat, the Templars remain a formidable force in European politics and finance. The Order's final Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, embodies both the continued strength and the fatal vulnerabilities of this transformed institution. When you imagine him, picture a man in his 60s, his face bearing the lines of decades spent managing vast responsibilities across multiple continents. Jacques is elected Grand Master in 1292, just as the Order faces the challenge of redefining its mission now that the Holy Land is lost. He is an able administrator, skilled in the complex financial and diplomatic arts that the Order's survival now requires. Under his leadership, the Templars maintain their network of commanderies, continue their banking operations, and begin to explore new possibilities for crusading activity. But Jacques also embodies the pride and inflexibility that will prove fatal to his Order. When King Philip IV of France begins his careful campaign to destroy the Templars, Jacques responds with the confidence of a man accustomed to negotiating with popes and emperors as equals. He cannot quite believe that any secular ruler would dare move against an Order that has served Christendom for 2 centuries. The morning of October 13, 1307, brings the end of the Templar story as a tale of power and glory. Across France, royal officials armed with sealed orders arrest every Templar they can find. Jacques de Molay himself is taken from the Templar temple in Paris, led away in chains like a common criminal. The charges against him and his Order heresy, blasphemy, corruption, will echo through the trials that follow Dot in his final years of imprisonment. As he watches his life's work systematically destroyed, Jacques perhaps reflects on the long path that brought the Order from those 9 poor nights in Jerusalem to this moment of disgrace and dissolution. The man who dies at the stake in 1314, maintaining his innocence and the honor of his Order to the very end, represents both the nobility and the tragedy of the Templar ideal. His execution, carried out on a small island in the Seine, while crowds watch from both banks, marks not just the end of a man, but the end of an era. The last Grand Master of the Knights Templar dies as he lived, with dignity, courage, and an unshakable belief in the righteousness of his cause. Whether that cause was truly righteous, whether the Templars deserved their fate, these questions will occupy historians for centuries to come. Asterisk, as we settle deeper into our gentle exploration of the Templars, let us now turn to the shadows and whispers that have surrounded this Order for 7 centuries since its dissolution. Here, in the realm of mystery and archaeological discovery, we find perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the Templar legacy, not what we know with certainty, but what we glimpse in fragments of stone, whispered traditions, and the careful analysis of scholars working to separate fact from fiction. Imagine yourself standing in the ruins of a Templar chapel somewhere in the English countryside, perhaps on a misty morning when the modern world seems very far away. The walls around you, built of honey-colored limestone 8 centuries ago, still bear the marks of the stonemasons who shaped them. Their work was precise, almost mathematical in its perfection, yet infused with symbolism that speaks to deeper meanings than mere architectural function. Run your fingers along the carved stones, feeling the slight roughness where weather has softened sharp edges cut by long-dead craftsmen. Here, in this arch, you can trace the outline of a green man, that ancient fertility symbol that somehow found its way into Christian architecture. There, above what was once the altar, a rose window admits light in patterns that seem to dance. With significance beyond mere decoration, these ruins hold secrets that archaeologists and historians continue to unravel. Recent excavations have revealed chambers beneath Templar chapels that were clearly designed for purposes beyond simple storage. The walls show evidence of careful acoustical design, suggesting that whatever rituals took place here required precise control of sound. Stone channels carved into floors hint at ceremonies involving water or other liquids, while geometric patterns etched into hidden surfaces speak of knowledge that the builders clearly considered sacred. The mystery deepens when we consider the Templars' relationship with the architectural revolution of their time. Picture yourself in the nave of Chartres Cathedral, completed during the height of Templar power, where soaring Gothic arches seem to defy the very laws of gravity. The mathematical precision required to build such structures was closely guarded. Knowledge passed down through guilds of master masons who worked on both cathedrals and Templar preceptories. Were the Templars merely patrons of these master builders, or were they something more? Evidence suggests a deeper connection. Templar churches often incorporate architectural elements that appear nowhere else: specific proportions, unusual orientations, decorative motifs that hint at influences from the East. The round churches that many Templar communities built, inspired by the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, create acoustic properties that transform chanted prayers into something almost otherworldly. Consider the mystery of Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, built by the St. Clair family in the 15th century, long after the Templars' official dissolution. Yet this extraordinary building seems to encode knowledge that could only have come from Templar sources. The stone carvings here depict plants from the New World maize and aloe vera carved decades before Columbus's voyage. How did the builders know of these plants? What knowledge preserved in Templar traditions found expression in this remote Scottish chapel? The interior of Rosslyn speaks in a language of symbol and allegory that scholars are still learning to read. Every pillar tells a story. Every arch conceals meaning. The famous apprentice pillar, with its spiraling carving of extraordinary complexity, seems to encode mathematical principles that were supposedly unknown in medieval Europe. Yet here they are, frozen in stone, waiting for each generation of researchers to discover new layers of meaning. But perhaps nowhere is the mystery of Templar knowledge more tantalizing than in their possible connection to the Holy Grail. Legends vary in their details, but many medieval sources suggest that the Templars discovered something of extraordinary importance during their years guarding the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. What did they find in those ancient chambers beneath Solomon's temple? What could have been significant enough to transform 9 poor knights into the most powerful organization in Europe? Archaeological evidence from the Temple Mount itself remains frustratingly incomplete, partly due to the political sensitivities surrounding this most sacred of sites. But what excavations have been permitted reveal a complex of chambers, tunnels, and vaults that extend deep beneath the current structures. Medieval sources describe the Templars conducting extensive excavations in these areas, searching for what they called the treasures of Solomon. Picture yourself descending into these ancient chambers, your torch casting dancing shadows on walls that have witnessed the rise and fall of empires. The air here is thick with the dust of millennia, and every stone seems to whisper of secrets buried and forgotten. What did the Templars find in places like this? Gold and silver would explain their rapid accumulation of wealth, but the sources hint at discoveries of a more spiritual nature: relics, manuscripts, perhaps knowledge itself. The Grail legends that flourished during the Templar period speak not just of a cup that held Christ's blood, but of a vessel of spiritual transformation, a source of hidden wisdom. In these stories, the Grail is often guarded by a community of knight monks who have dedicated their lives to protecting this sacred trust. The parallels to the Templars are obvious, yet the connections remain tantalizingly just beyond proof. More. Concrete is the evidence of the Templars' role in preserving and transmitting ancient knowledge. Their libraries, scattered across Europe, contain texts in Greek, Arabic, and Hebrew that would otherwise have been lost. They were among the few Christian organizations of their time to maintain scholarly contact with Jewish and Muslim intellectuals. Trading knowledge as well as goods across the Mediterranean, the Templar Preceptory at Acre, before its fall in 1291, housed one of the finest libraries in the medieval world. Chroniclers describe rooms filled with manuscripts on subjects ranging from theology to astronomy, from ancient philosophy to cutting-edge mathematics. When the city fell, much of this priceless collection was lost, but some texts were certainly evacuated to Cyprus, and thence to Europe. Consider the mystery of the Templar fleet that sailed from La Rochelle just before the order's suppression. In 1307, 18 galleys vanished from the harbor, taking with them not just men and treasure, but also the contents of the order's archives. Where did these ships go? Portugal, Scotland, and the New World have all been suggested as destinations, each supported by tantalizing fragments of evidence. In Portugal, the Templars simply reorganized under a new name, the Order of Christ, and continued their activities with barely a pause. The Red Cross of the Templars became the symbol under which Portuguese explorers would map the world's oceans. Henry the Navigator, the prince who launched the age of exploration, was a Grand Master of the Order of Christ. Did Templar knowledge of navigation, preserved from their years in the eastern Mediterranean, help guide Portuguese ships to India and Brazil? Scotland offers equally intriguing possibilities. Robert the Bruce, excommunicated and fighting for his kingdom's independence, would have welcomed experienced military men, regardless of their legal status elsewhere. The presence of Templar knights at the Battle of Bannockburn is supported by both historical records and local tradition. More mysteriously, the St. Clair family, builders of Rosslyn Chapel, claimed descent from Templar knights, and preserved traditions that they maintained came from the Order's secret teachings. The New World hypothesis is more speculative, but no, less fascinating. Oak Island, off the coast of Nova Scotia, has yielded artifacts and structural remains that some researchers believe indicate pre-Columbian European presence. Carbon dating of wood from deep in the island's mysterious money pit suggests construction in the 14th century, precisely when Templar refugees would have been seeking new homes beyond the reach of European persecution. But let us turn from speculation to more solid ground, where archaeology and careful scholarship are slowly revealing the true extent of Templar cultural influence. Recent excavations at Templar sites across Europe have revealed a sophisticated network of communication and trade that extended far beyond what historical records suggested. At the Templar commandery of Cressingtemple in England, archaeological work has uncovered evidence of industrial activity on a scale that transformed the local economy. The Templars here were not just agricultural landlords, but pioneering manufacturers, producing everything from woolen cloth to iron goods. Their workshops incorporated technological innovations that wouldn't become widespread for centuries: water-powered machinery, precision metalworking, even early forms of mass production. Similar discoveries at sites in France and Spain paint a picture of the Templars as agents of technological and economic transformation. They introduced new farming techniques, improved strains of crops and livestock, and pioneered banking methods that laid the foundation for modern capitalism. Their network of preceptories served as nodes in a communication system that could move information across Europe faster than any royal postal service. The cultural impact of this Templar network extended into realms we are only beginning to understand. Recent research suggests they played a crucial role in the transmission of Islamic scientific knowledge to Christian Europe. Templar scholars, uniquely positioned to work with Muslim intellectuals in the Crusader states, translated and preserved texts on mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy that might otherwise have remained unknown to the West. Consider the mystery of Gothic architecture itself, that revolutionary building style that emerged during the height of Templar power. The technical knowledge required to build these soaring cathedrals, the understanding of stress and load-bearing, the mathematical precision of flying buttresses, the optical principles behind rose windows, all of this appears in European architecture. With startling suddenness in the 12th century, Islamic architecture had already mastered many of these techniques, and Templar builders working in the East would have observed them firsthand. Did they bring more than architectural inspiration back to Europe? Did they carry with them actual technical knowledge, perhaps even Islamic master builders willing to share their secrets? The evidence is circumstantial but compelling. The symbolic language that appears in Templar architecture adds another layer to the mystery. Carved into stone corbels, hidden in the geometry of floor plans, embedded in the proportions of windows and doors, we find a consistent system of symbols that appears across the Templar world. Some of these symbols clearly derive from Christian tradition: crosses, lambs, representations of Christ and the saints. Others seem to come from different sources entirely. Islamic geometric patterns appear in Templar churches, carefully integrated with Christian iconography in ways that suggest deliberate syncretism rather than casual borrowing. Jewish mystical symbols: the tree of life, complex geometric patterns related to Kabbalistic thought appear in contexts that suggest the Templars had access to esoteric Jewish teachings. Even more mysteriously, some Templar sites incorporate symbols that seem to predate Christianity entirely, drawing on Celtic, Germanic, or even classical traditions that were supposedly lost to medieval builders. The mystery deepens when we examine Templar seals and other official documents. The famous seal showing two knights riding a single horse is usually interpreted as a symbol of poverty or brotherhood, but some scholars suggest it encodes deeper meanings related to the dual nature of the order: half monk, half warrior. Other Templar seals show architectural elements, astronomical symbols, and geometric patterns that clearly held significance beyond mere decoration. Recent digital analysis of these documents has revealed hidden layers of meaning previously invisible to the naked eye. Watermarks in Templar parchments sometimes contain geometric patterns related to sacred architecture. Marginalia in there. Manuscripts include symbols and notations that suggest knowledge of mathematical principles not officially known in medieval Europe. Even their accounting records, when analyzed statistically, show patterns that suggest the use of sophisticated financial instruments centuries before their supposed invention. The suppression of the Templars in 1307 scattered this knowledge to the winds, but it did not destroy it entirely. Across Europe, families claiming Templar descent preserved traditions, documents, and artifacts that they passed down through generations. Many of these family traditions were dismissed as romantic fantasy, but modern research is revealing that some contain remarkably accurate historical information that could only have come from genuine sources. In the Scottish Highlands, families like the Sinclairs maintained libraries that included manuscripts supposedly dating from the Templar period. When scholars finally gained access to examine these documents, they found texts in multiple languages, some dealing with subjects that were supposedly unknown to medieval European scholars. Maps showing accurate coastlines of distant continents, astronomical calculations of extraordinary precision, even what appear to be alchemical formulas that anticipate later scientific discoveries. The mystery of Templar survival extends beyond individual families to entire communities. In remote valleys of the Pyrenees, villages maintain traditions they claim derive from Templar refugees who settled there after 1307. Their local festivals include ceremonies with symbolic elements that mirror descriptions of secret Templar rituals mentioned in the trial records. Their churches contain architectural elements that echo the geometry found in authenticated Templar buildings. Most intriguingly, These communities preserved oral traditions about hidden Templar treasures that, when finally investigated, led to actual discoveries. Caves in the French countryside have yielded caches of medieval coins, weapons, and documents that carbon dating confirms date from the early 14th century. While none of these finds proves the survival of the Templars as an organization, they do suggest that the order's dissolution was not as complete as official records indicate. The cultural legacy of the Templars extends far beyond hidden treasures and secret knowledge. Their influence on the development of European chivalry, their role in the evolution of banking and commerce, their contribution to the intellectual ferment that would eventually produce the Renaissance, all of these are measurable historical impacts that shape the world we inhabit today. Yet it is the mysteries that continue to capture our imagination. In quiet moments, when you stand among the ruins of a Templar church or handle a medieval document bearing their seal, you could almost feel the presence of secrets that remain unsolved. What knowledge did they possess? What discoveries did they make? What treasures, material or spiritual, did they hide from their persecutors? The search for answers continues, carried forward by archaeologists who dig carefully through the layers of centuries, by scholars who analyze medieval texts with modern techniques, by historians who piece together fragmentary evidence to reconstruct vanished worlds. Each new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle, another glimpse into the hidden dimensions of Templar history. Segment 4. Social elite contrasting daily life. The Templars in medieval society as our gentle journey through Templar history draws toward its close. Let us explore how these warrior monks moved through the complex social landscape of medieval Europe, touching the lives of everyone from emperors to peasants. In this final exploration, we'll discover how the Templars both reflected and transformed the rigid hierarchies of their time, creating a unique space where birth mattered less than dedication, where a farmer's son might command princes, and where the intersection of sacred and secular power created opportunities and tensions that would ultimately contribute to their downfall. Picture yourself in the great hall of a royal palace in 12th century Paris, where the morning sun streams through tall windows to illuminate a scene of carefully orchestrated magnificence. The walls are hung with rich tapestries depicting hunting scenes and heroic deeds, while servants in colorful livery move silently among tables laden with silver vessels and exotic delicacies. The air carries the mingled scents of rosewater, costly spices, and the beeswax candles that burn even in daylight to demonstrate the host's wealth. King Louis VII sits upon his throne, a figure whose very presence embodies the theory of divine monarchy that governs medieval society. His robes are of the finest silk, dyed in colors so vibrant they seem to glow in the morning light. The golden crown upon his head catches and scatters light like captured starfire, while jeweled rings on his fingers speak of treasuries that span continents. Every aspect of his appearance has been calculated to inspire awe and reinforce his position as God's anointed representative on earth. Before him stands a figure who presents a stark contrast to this royal magnificence. The Templar. Master's white mantle is spotless but simple, adorned only with the red cross that marks his order. His hair is cut short in the practical style mandated by the rule, and his hands, free of jeweled rings, bear the calluses of a man who still trains regularly with sword and lance despite his administrative responsibilities. When he speaks, his voice carries quiet authority, but he shows none of the elaborate courtesies that other visitors perform before the throne. This scene, replayed countless times across medieval Europe, illustrates the unique position the Templars occupied in feudal society. They were simultaneously inside and outside the normal social hierarchies, bound by vows of poverty, yet wielding enormous economic power, sworn to obedience, yet answerable only to the Pope, not to any earthly king. This paradoxical status gave them extraordinary influence, but also made them objects of suspicion and resentment. The conversation between king and Templar master reveals the complex dance of medieval diplomacy. Louis VII needs the order's support for his planned crusade, their financial resources, their military expertise, their network of contacts across Europe and the Holy Land. But he also chafes at their independence, their refusal to bend the knee as completely as his other subjects. The Templar, for his part, must balance his order's interests with the diplomatic necessities of dealing with secular rulers whose support remains essential to Templar operations. "Your Majesty," the Templar master says, his tone respectful but not subservient, "we stand ready to serve the cause of the Holy Land as we have always done. Our treasuries are open to fund your expedition. Our knights will fight beside yours. Our ships will carry your army to the east. But we must insist that our brothers serve under their own commanders, following the rule that governs our order, rather than the customs of secular armies." The king's response reveals the tensions inherent in this relationship. He needs what the Templars offer, but their conditions remind him that there are limits to his authority, spaces in his kingdom, where his word is not supreme. The Templars' exemption from royal taxation, their right to maintain their own courts, their direct accountability to Rome, all of these privileges represent cracks in the edifice of royal absolutism that kings like Louis are working to construct. Let us shift our perspective to see how these same Templars appeared to those at the opposite end of the social spectrum. Picture yourself in a small village in the English countryside, where the rhythm of life follows the seasons and most inhabitants never travel more than a few miles from where they were born. The Templar commandery that dominates the local landscape represents both opportunity and oppression to the peasants who work its lands. For a serf like William, whose family has worked the same plot of land for generations, the Templars are simultaneously lords and liberators. The commandery's fields are better managed than those of secular nobles, with crop rotation systems that maintain soil fertility and drainage projects that prevent the flooding that devastates harvests elsewhere. Templar administrators keep careful records and maintain consistent policies, avoiding the arbitrary cruelties that characterize many feudal relationships. Yet William also understands that the Templars' wealth comes partly from his labor and that of thousands like him. The grain he grows feeds not just his own family, but also supports the elaborate network of knights, sergeants, and chaplains who live within the commandery walls. The livestock he tends, the buildings he helps maintain, the roads he helps repair, all of these contribute to the order's power and influence in ways that bring him no direct benefit. The annual visit of the Templar master to inspect the commandery provides William with his only glimpse of the larger world these warrior monks inhabit. He watches from a respectful distance as the great man tours the fields, his trained eye assessing crops and livestock with the same attention to detail he would bring to inspecting fortifications or reviewing accounts. The master's questions to the local commander reveal an understanding of agricultural techniques that surprises William. These knights may spend their time in prayer and military training, but they clearly understand the practical foundations upon which their order rests. What William cannot fully grasp is how different his life is from that of peasants on other matters. The Templars' systematic approach to estate management, their access to advanced agricultural techniques learned in the East, their ability to invest in long-term improvements, all of these factors make life on Templar lands marginally better than the brutal subsistence existence that characterizes much of medieval rural life. He eats slightly better, faces fewer arbitrary punishments, and enjoys marginally greater security than his counterparts elsewhere. This relative prosperity comes at a cost that extends beyond economic exploitation. The Templars' religious mission permeates every aspect of life within their territories. Village churches are rebuilt according to Templar architectural principles, incorporating symbols and proportions that reflect the order's theological perspectives. Local festivals are reorganized to emphasize Christian themes that support Templar interpretations of sacred history. Even marriage customs are influenced by the order's emphasis on celibacy and spiritual purity. The most visible impact of Templar presence comes through their recruitment practices. Unlike secular nobles who inherit their positions, Templars must constantly attract new members to replace those lost to age, disease, and warfare. The commandery serves as a showcase designed to impress potential recruits, demonstrating the order's wealth, organization, and spiritual dedication. For a young man like William's son Thomas, the Templars represent a path to a life unimaginable within the normal constraints of feudal society. The order accepts members regardless of birth. A peasant son who demonstrates appropriate qualities can theoretically rise to positions of great responsibility. The practical skills required for Templar service, literacy, numeracy, military training, administrative competence, are all provided through the order's internal educational systems. But the price of this opportunity is total commitment. Thomas must take vows that separate him forever from the life he has known, abandoning any hope of marriage, inheritance, or independent action. He exchanges the familiar constraints of feudal obligation for the more absolute restrictions of monastic discipline. Whether this represents liberation or a different form of bondage depends on perspective and temperament. The ceremony of vows. Thomas's reception into the order reveals how the Templars sought to bridge different social worlds. The ritual takes place in the commandery chapel, attended by both his peasant family and the knight brothers who will become his new family. The words spoken emphasize spiritual equality in God's eyes. The ceremony suggests a peasant's devotion is as valuable as a noble's. Yet the practical arrangements reveal ongoing hierarchies. Thomas will begin as a sergeant brother, and only those of noble birth can aspire to full knight-brotherhood. Let us now consider how the Templars appeared to the merchant classes whose rise coincided with the order's golden age. In the bustling commercial centers of medieval Europe, cities like Venice, Genoa, Bruges, and London, the Templars were both competitors and essential partners in the expanding networks of international trade. Picture yourself in the counting house of a Venetian merchant in the late 12th century, where ledgers record transactions that span from Ireland to Constantinople. The room smells of ink, parchment, and the exotic spices that represent one source of the family's wealth. Maps cover the walls, marking trade routes and commercial centers with the precision of a military campaign. Here, the Templars appear, not as warrior monks, but as financial innovators whose services make long-distance commerce possible. The merchant, Giovanni, depends on Templar banking services to manage the complex financial arrangements that international trade requires. The order's system of credit notes allows him to deposit silver in Venice and withdraw gold in Acre, avoiding the risks of transporting precious metals across bandit-infested roads and pirate-haunted seas. Templar guarantees make possible commercial ventures that would otherwise be too risky to attempt. Yet Giovanni also resents the Templars' advantages in this commercial competition. Their exemption from many taxes and tolls, their access to preferential treatment in Crusader ports, their ability to combine commercial and military activities, all of these give them unfair advantages in markets where other merchants must operate under much greater constraints. The Templars' ships carry both pilgrims and cargo. Their warehouses store both military supplies and commercial goods. Their agents serve both religious and economic functions. The tension between cooperation and competition characterizes many merchant relationships with the Templars. Giovanni needs their services, but fears their growing dominance of international finance. He profits from the stability their presence brings to trade routes, but worries about the long-term implications of their expanding commercial empire. The Templars represent both the future of European commerce and a threat to the independence of merchant families like his own. These complex Relationships become even more fraught when we consider the Templars' interactions with the Jewish communities that played crucial roles in medieval commerce and finance. In cities across Europe, Jewish merchants and moneylenders found themselves both allied with and threatened by Templar expansion into financial services. Picture yourself in the Jewish quarter of Paris, where narrow streets house communities that have developed sophisticated financial techniques out of necessity. Excluded from most guilds and many forms of land ownership, Jewish families have specialized in the money-changing and long-distance credit arrangements that the expanding European economy requires. The Templars' entry into these markets represents both opportunity and existential threat. Rabbi Abraham, a leader in the Jewish community, understands that the Templars' success in finance comes partly from adapting techniques that Jewish merchants developed over centuries of exclusion from other economic activities. The order's credit instruments, their accounting methods, even their approaches to risk management all bear clear influences from Jewish commercial practices. Yet the Templars can operate with official sanction and papal protection that Jewish merchants never enjoy. The relationship is further complicated by the Templars' role in the Crusades, which have brought waves of anti-Jewish violence to European cities. While individual Templars may maintain respectful business relationships with Jewish merchants, the order as a whole serves a movement that has made Jewish communities targets for popular anger and royal exploitation. The same ships that carry Templar bankers to the east also carry crusading armies that view Jews as enemies of Christ. Yet necessity creates strange alliances. When Christian rulers need quick access to large amounts of capital, they often find that cooperation between Templar and Jewish financiers provides the only practical solution. The Templars' international network, combined with Jewish communities, local knowledge, and existing credit relationships, can mobilize resources that neither group could manage alone. These partnerships remain largely hidden from public view, but surviving records reveal extensive cooperation, despite the religious and social barriers that officially separate these communities. The impact of Templar financial innovation extends far beyond professional merchants and moneylenders to transform the lives of ordinary people across Europe. Consider the experience of Margaret, a widow in a small English town, whose husband's death has left her struggling to maintain the family shop. Under traditional feudal arrangements, her options would be severely limited. She might lose the business to male relatives, be forced into a disadvantageous remarriage, or face destitution. But the Templars' presence in her region has created new possibilities. The order's systematic approach to estate management requires reliable suppliers of goods and services, creating markets for local producers who can meet their standards. Margaret's skills in textile production, learned through years of helping her husband, suddenly have value beyond the local market. The Templars need consistent supplies of cloth for their habits and household needs, and they pay promptly in silver rather than the mixture of goods and promises that characterizes much local commerce. More importantly, the Templars' financial services allow Margaret to plan for the future in ways previously impossible. She can deposit her profits in the local commandery, earning a modest return while keeping her capital safe from theft or confiscation. She can arrange for credit to purchase raw materials during harvest season when prices are low, then repay a loan after selling finished goods at higher winter prices. These services, routine in our modern economy, represent revolutionary innovations that transform the possibilities available to ordinary people. Yet, Margaret also experiences the darker aspects of living within the Templar sphere of influence. The order's growing wealth and power create resentments that periodically explode into violence against anyone associated with their operations. When King Edward I expels all Jews from England in 1290, some of the popular anger also targets Christian merchants and craftspeople who have worked closely with both Jewish and Templar financiers. Margaret finds herself caught between the economic opportunities that Templar connections provide and the social suspicions that such connections generate.